Hello, and a warm welcome this afternoon to our second day of the festival. We are quite lucky today to have with us the Global Director for Communications of the FSC. This is even more auspicious because today is World Forest Day, and I know that the World Forest Day will be having a number of events happening throughout this week to celebrate this day. And we are so grateful to be kicking it off with Jeanette Van Der Westhuizen, who is the Director of Communications for the FSC. And interviewing her and in conversation with her is Jeanette Bennett, who is a writer, freelance writer and editor. So over to you, Jeanette.
Hi. Karen,
yeah,
could you start? Hi. Could you start with telling us what the Forest Stewardship Council is? What it is, what it does?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Jeanette. Let me share my screen with you, and I have a few slides to show you, so that might make things a little bit easier. Just tell me when you can see it.
Okay, got it.
You can see it? Good, okay.
Yeah.
So whenever I talk about the Forest Stewardship Council or FSD, I get a few blank stares, but then when I show people the logo, which is that Pick Tree logo, most people recognize it because you've seen it on wood that you buy, on wooden furniture. You've seen it on the backs of your coffee cups. You've seen it on boxes and packages in your grocery cupboard. You see it all over the place. So definitely our logo is a lot more recognizable than the name. And what we do is pretty complicated. So we're a certification scheme. We certify forests. And we do that through a whole bunch of technical rules and regulations that certified companies must use in order to manage a forest. So that's like a whole lot of jobs. What it really means is that if these rules and regulations are followed, timber can be harvested out of the forest in such a way that there's no net loss of forest. Overall, there's no loss of forest. And there's minimal damage done to the environment. So things like biodiversity is protected. Endangered species, there's a number of programs where endangered species, their numbers are able to increase under our management. People who live in the forest, like indigenous communities, for example, they all have a say in how the forest is managed, and they get benefit from that. And we do things like make sure that religious and cultural rights are respected in that whole process. And then finally, the workers, the people who work in the forest, we make sure that they are treated according to some criteria which we've set up in FSD, which is according to the International Labour Organization criteria. So generally the whole thing is about making sure the forest is there for many, many, many generations to come while it's meeting the needs of society and protecting those that rely on the forest.
Okay, so many, many facets.
Absolutely.
If you look back at FSC publications, you certainly don't see like use of plain English and storytelling. It certainly wasn't a feature in the past. So I mean, what has brought you to storytelling? Where did you learn this value? How did you learn the value? And why did you start using storytelling and plain English?
Well, we're very good at using words like silviculture and coppice and biomass and all the rest of it. And we think they're wonderful words. We know exactly what they mean. But we kept being asked by our members. We're a membership organization. So we kept being asked by our members and by our certificate holders to please talk about the impact of FSC on the ground in a way that people can understand. And so about 18 months ago, we decided to incorporate storytelling into our communication strategy. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We were kind of feeling around in the dark, and we sort of did a search. We found a story that we thought was fantastic. FSC had this new technology that we put in place with Kew Gardens, and basically the technology was we took a call of little wood about so big out of a tree, off to Kew Gardens. They did some isotope testing on it because every tree has its own isotope signature depending on where it is in the world. And Kew Gardens could then pinpoint where the wood came from, sort of within a few kilometer radius around this tree. And we thought this was a fantastic story. So we started putting this at media, and we wanted to get it into a mainstream publication like The Guardian, for example, Le Monde in France. And we kept pushing and pushing, and it's doing this really amazing thing. Why is nobody buying it? It's a technology story. It's about forest and deforestation is a very big topic, and we actually understand it until we really sat back and just took off our FSC glasses and started thinking about what the audience who's reading these publications would want to see, and they would want to read about it. Most of them, when they see the word FSC, they don't know what it is. But what they would want to read about is how this tool can help prevent deforestation, how it can help prevent illegal logging. And so we switched up to media so that it was coming across as the tool, we called it the Tree Detector. This is how, this is a tool that can prevent illegal logging. And suddenly it was picked up. I mean, it was literally, I'm beginning to tell you, from the smallest little newspaper in southern Italy through to The Guardian, all the news wires, and we were even on CNN. So, the story just grew, and that really showed us exactly what the power is of turning your story angle so that it relates to the story. I'm going to show you my first slide. For some reason that's not working. There we go. So, the story, can you see that?
There we go. Yeah, okay. There we go.
These are some of the headlines from the story that we use, that we placed. And you can see that it's about Kew Gardens, nothing about FSC. The FSC came much further down in the story, but it's the tree sleuths who are using DNA tests and machine vision to crack timber crimes. There's the Tree Detector, the high-tech war and illegal logging. And this is the kind of story that people were looking for. And so it really showed us, that was sort of our first big lesson, it has to be about the audience. It's not about what we want people to know. It's about what people want to know and how we can frame what we want to say in a way that comes across how people want to hear.
Wow, that is a wonderful story itself. But now I'm guessing that not everyone got on board straight away onto this whole storytelling thing, because it's like maybe too simple in this big important world of FSC. So how did you convince the skeptics and maybe the more technically minded people to come on board?
Yeah, look, there certainly were those that supported the whole storytelling effort. But of course, I work with a bunch of scientists, and storytelling was not seen as a scientific means to communicate at all. It's sort of seen as this really warm and fluffy thing. It's not hard science. So, we use data to support what we're narrating in the story, but it's not all about data. So I wouldn't say there was pushback, but certainly we needed to get those who held the budget strings on our side, so that they could really start understanding, why we needed to invest money in photography and good photography and videography and traveling to get the story. And so we used this graphic. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. And basically it talks about how storytelling affects the brain. So you've got dopamine, which is a chemical in the brain. And when you are telling a story and people are really connecting with it, your brain releases dopamine. The dopamine is something that your brain releases when you eat chocolate, just to give it a comparison. This definitely makes things much easier to remember. And science has shown us, research has shown us that once the dopamine is released, people can remember things also with greater accuracy. You also... there's a technique, there's a thing that happens in your brain called mirroring, where the listeners experience similar brain activity to the speaker. So you really are making a connection and engaging. Parts of your brain, when you're listening to facts, it trigger only two areas of it, but story can trigger multiple areas, again, which makes things much easier to remember. And then stories also activate parts of the brain that allow a listener to turn the story into their own experiences. So they can really, really connect with it and relate to it. And once we just started showing this and the data that supported what I have on the slide, I think a lot more people came on. Of course, once we also started showing the results we were having with our stories, definitely, I think most of our colleagues, if not all of them, are on board now. But it did take some time for that to happen.
Wow, the real science there. So apart from the Tree Detector, can you give us some other examples of how FSC is using storytelling in its work? And it's not just about words, is it? I mean, you use, here you're using a graphic as well. So
yeah. Absolutely. So I've got 3 examples that I want to take you through. So as Bev said when she introduced us, today is World Forest Day. So this is the first example on your screen now, which is the campaign that we're launching today, and it's called the Tree B&B. So one of the things that we want to do with consumers particularly, but just on that point, if I can sort of take an aside, when we post campaigns like this onto our social networks like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, people think, well, they're fun, so they're only for consumers. You'd be amazed at how many politicians, heads of forestry companies, CEOs of businesses are retweeting and sharing this content and clicking on it. So let me tell you, stories are not only for consumers, they're also reaching much, much bigger audiences. So we wanted people to really understand how much diversity or how each tree supports in a forest, and also how important that tree is and the biodiversity that it supports is to the whole ecosystem of forest. And I mean, one way to do that is to show a picture of a tree. There's a banyan tree in there, to show a picture of a tree and sort of blah, blah, blah. And, the bark is used for medicinal use. And then it gets visited by the hornbill and the macaque and the tree. So, I mean, it's very beautiful. But the other way to do it was to really turn it into something fun and engaging. And so this is a different take on storytelling, really, because we've used the Tree B&B. It's almost like the don't tell anyone, the Airbnb concept, where it's advertised online. So where the tree itself introduces itself as the host of the abode where you can go and stay. This is from Twitter. This is appearing today. Our Twitter handle is there at FSC_IC if you want to go and have a look at all the different cases. But this is about the banyan tree, which is India's national tree. So there's a little video that plays, and it's really gorgeous. I do encourage you to go and have a look, because when you play the video, you can actually hear all the sounds that you would hear if you were standing underneath the banyan tree. It's really beautiful to do. And the other thing it takes you to is our webpage, where this tree introduces itself like you would on Airbnb. This is a beautiful house overlooking the sea, and you can sit on the balcony and eat your breakfast and all the rest. It's kind of in that sort of way that it's introduced. But it gives you all the facts, like it's 300 years old. It tells you that it's part of it has a Hindu religious significance. It tells you that the bark is used for certain medicinal purposes. And then further down, it does things like those who have stayed, and it lists all the animals that, stay, who live in the tree. It lists those that visit the different species. I've actually got a screen like this. Here we go. So those who die, pigs, the flipcat primates, the birds like flycatchers, hornbills, and so on. Those who dine and stay, insects, bees, butterflies, beetles, birds, and different kinds of birds. Mammals and those mammals, and the primates, the different kinds of primates that dine and stay. And then those that live in the tree, the Indian flying fox, the common Indian mongoose, common palm civet. Excellent moisture levels under my canopy, and it's ideal for many tree dwellers like wildcats and birds like hawks and eagles. So you can really get a feel for what that tree's about in kind of a fun way. And then my absolute favorite part, the reviews that are left by all the animals who live there. And this is a screenshot. I'm sorry, the quality is not so good. I've screenshotted and blown it up. But this is the review left by the Indian flying fox. And my colleague who developed this whole campaign has got such an amazing creativity. He actually listened to the sounds and watched the movements of all the animals that she wrote the reviews for. And a lot of the reviews that she left are sort of in the way that you can imagine this animal leaving this review. So this one by the Indian flying fox who stayed there in the banyan tree in June 2020, all night flying, all night working, you get so tired. Banyan is where you day roost. Great for traveling in groups like that. The neighbors were nice and did not complain. You tend to get loud. You can just imagine the sort of what these animals are doing there. And I haven't seen this there from today, but we're sure that this is really going to engage people into what the banyan tree is all about and how important it is in the protected forest. So I have a second example for you, and this is from the nearest national park, which is in Lithuania. This photo was taken by drone. Absolutely beautiful park. And this is a very simple little story. So this is a real story. It's not trying to use a narrative way to educate people. This is a story that we get. And the story is about a little mouse. The little mouse is a dormouse. It's called the fat dormouse. I was most upset when I heard that name, but that apparently is a common name. It's called the fat dormouse, or the glitlis is a scientific name.
It was the glitlis.
Glitlis. So it used to live in the trees in this particular area of Lithuania. But the trees, of course, were all chopped down. So the little mouse didn't have a place to live. Now, it's not on the endangered list of IUCN worldwide, but in Lithuania, where it is a native species, it is threatened. It's severely threatened there because its trees have been removed. And what we've done as part of the FSC certification, the park has FSC certification, and as part of them trying to bring back the numbers of the little fat dormouse, they've actually built little breeding boxes for these mice made out of the wood of the trees that they used to roost in. And the trees are sort of are hung from branches. I'm sorry, the boxes are hung from branches of trees. And then they check, the numbers are checked every year. And for the first few years, there's 15 boxes. The people who were checking the boxes would say they'd find one or two additional dormouse, maybe when they were asked to sort of go and open each box and have a look, only one or two. And this year they found sort of one or two each day that they went. So there were 6 or 7 of them. So the numbers are definitely increasing. If you have a look at this little dormouse, he's cute, he's really, and he's tiny. So this is a really super. And then here's the picture of him close up. He's like he's my screensaver. I think he's just so sweet. So when we were sitting, what we do once we've gathered a story is we all gather together as a team. So the staff person who collected the story, myself, our head of social media, and our head of media. And we really start thrashing out what are we going to do with the story. And this was a lovely little story. So, of course, we would do a social media campaign with it. It just sort of made sense. But then again, it's not really something we would pitch to a journalist to run in a mainstream publication because it's a little story, And then we thought that the photographs are absolutely magnificent. Look at that, right? Really, really beautiful photograph. So why don't we try somebody like National Geographic? Never done that before, but what the hell didn't hold us back. So off we went and we spoke with National Geographic and they ran the story on the fat dormouse. And we ended up reaching around 20 million people who heard about the wonderful work that the nearest national park is doing in Lithuania and how they really are saving this little dormouse. So that's another example. And then final example is sort of a more serious one. This one is really serious. This picture's distorting a little. Sorry for that. But this is a story about the Sami people, who are the indigenous people who live in around the coast in the Arctic, sort of inland and around the coast of the Arctic Circle, and they've lived there for since 11,000 BC. You know, very, very harsh conditions that they live in. They are reindeer herders, very tight communities, and their livelihood depend on their reindeer. So one of the, you know, we didn't just want to tell good news stories with our storytelling. We really also wanted to talk about ways that FSC is succeeding. There's a lot of those, but there's also places where we need to do some more work. And we decided to adopt this approach because we know, so FSC is quite a pioneering organization. We will often go and work in forests where, or in situations where other certification schemes don't go because it's just difficult, very sensitive. There's a lot of political little ramblings going along. There might be unrest, or in the case of the Sami, there's big commercial interest in the forest where they live. And so we took the decision that we were going to really talk about in our stories. We were going to talk about what we're doing right, but we're also going to talk about where we are falling short. And this story is definitely a case of how we've helped a little, but not enough. So the Sami people, as I mentioned to you, are reindeer herders. And when we go into a country and start developing standards, we make sure, as I mentioned right in the beginning, that every stakeholder in the forest is included in the discussion about how that forest is managed. What we didn't realize at the time is that for the Sami people to do something like that, you know, if you're a company, if you're a forest company, this is your livelihood. You have people who specialize in these kind of negotiations and consultations, and off they go, and they sort of debate what needs to be included in the forestry standard. When you're in a community that herds reindeers, that's the only thing that you do. You don't have somebody sitting on the side waiting to go and take part in discussions with you. So they would be part of some discussions and not part of other discussions. Now, that's the background. So let me tell you what the story is. So the Sami are reindeer herders. The reindeer eat lichen, ground lichen and tree lichen. The lichen in the trees, there's a picture of it. The lichen that grows in the trees takes 130 years for it to grow. FSC standard says if you are to cut a tree, you have to allow 90 years for it to regrow in this particular area, right? Not 150, it's 90 years. So it's not long enough for it to grow and the lichen to grow on. And what's happening is the reindeer are running out of food. They are given a supplement feed, but apparently it's not good for their stomachs, and some of them actually even die from supplement feed. So, so this is the story that we've used, and we've interviewed people in the story. We have the quotes that talk about, look, much better now that they have FSC certification, because before there was nothing. Companies could just come and cut trees, you know, there was no kind of nothing stopping them. Now that they're all following the FSC standard, it's much better. But FSC needs to do more. First of all, to make sure that the felling period the growth period is long enough for the lichen to grow. And secondly, to help the Sami people to be really part of these consultations. We have an Indigenous Foundation that was newly launched last year. And the foundation, this is one of the things they will be helping Indigenous people with all over the world, is to make sure that they have a real and consistent voice in any of these negotiations. You know, it's something that we learn as we go. As I say, we do make mistakes, and it's definitely not something that we shy away from. And we find that stories are a very gentle way to bring across these really sensitive topics and to explain exactly what the full context of the story is. This is a picture of the reindeer herds. I was told it was minus 42 in this picture. It's a little bit too cold for me, but you can just imagine the challenges that the Sami are facing where they are.
I don't think the pictures are there.
If you got it? You got the picture?
Yeah, it's come up. Sorry, it's come up. Yep, it's come up.
So you can imagine climate change. So, for example, the year before the story was taken, the reindeer were crossing a frozen lake, and the ice collapsed, and they lost 200 reindeer out of their herd. There's also things like roads now that are being built in the area now that they're more accessible, and the reindeer are hit by trucks and things as they're crossing the road. There's mining happening, and then they've got the speed problem. So, very difficult story that's happening up in the Arctic Circle. If anybody's interested in the story, it is on Medium. Just search for Forest Stewardship Council and you'll find the full story there. It really is, it's quite sad what's happening. Please know that these people are being helped now. And I think that's the 3 stories that I brought to show you guys.
Your 3. You mentioned that there was a video for the Bunyan B&B. How will people find that?
So if you go to our Twitter channel, which is at FSC_IC, and you just click on the tweet, and it comes up on the tweet, and you can also link to the website where the videos are embedded as well from that.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so, well, there's stories and there's stories. They're good stories and they're bad stories. I mean, bad in the way they're done. So you've had a year and a half, basically, of moving storytelling into, like, the heart of your communications work. I mean, what have you learned in that time about, what makes a good story? And I'm also thinking that these kind of lessons will go beyond FSC and forestry and forests. To all kinds of fields, from finance to health,
Of course, yes, absolutely. Sorry, my screen stopped sharing itself. Let me just get it back. The last slide for you. There we go. Can you see that?
Okay, it's coming up.
Tell me when it comes up. Take a while.
There we go. It's there. It's come.
Okay, great. So, I mean, look, I don't think we've stopped learning, and I have no doubt that we haven't finished learning either. I think, we learn something new every time we produce a story. I mentioned this already. The golden rule for me is that the audience comes first. The audience before anything else. It doesn't matter what FSC wants to say. It doesn't matter what my boss wants to say. We have to put the audience first. If you can't tell a story that your audience can relate to, it's not a story. So you really need to know who your audience is, how they like to receive information, and what they like to hear, and what they've heard already. Don't tell them something they already know. So that's definitely a lesson. Depending on where you're placing it, it's always good to find a new angle on the trending topic. So I think a really good example of that is the isotope story, the Tree Detector story that I told you. So this is a trending topic, definitely deforestation, and this was a new technology. So as soon as we spun it in that way, that's when we got success. So always look for what's trending and try to piggyback on that. Good. Not just good pictures. We really battle. We want excellent pictures that could win awards. They're so good. The picture themselves can quite often just tell a story on its own. So, so we make sure that we have a small database of photographers, and those are the photographers that we use all over the world. It really is. I think our experience with National Geographic showed us that we would never have got that published if we had that. Even if we had mediocre pictures, it wouldn't have been published. Video as well. FSC is on a tiny budget, so we don't really have money to send video crews, but we are all learning. There's a learning how to shoot video on our phones. So hopefully we'll be using a lot more video sooner. Minimal focus on FSD. When you're telling a story, it's not about everything. It's about the topic, and it's about what's going to be interesting to the audience. It's not about FSD. Of course, we're going to weave in FSD. Of course we are, but that will come much further down, and it will be a minimal weave-in. And I think that's something that we've also had to really reinforce with our colleagues along the way. You know, it's we can't have a promotional. This can't be a PR thing. because then it's just going to lose credibility, and also it's not going to be big. Nobody wants to read a promotional an advert. They'd rather read a story. Keep it short, very simple, very clear. Don't use jargon. This might sound really sort of a no-brainer, but we still battle with this because these are words that we use every day. We use words like controlled wood and normative framework and things like this. We use these words every day in our work, and they almost become automatic for us. So it's real conscious thinking to sort of keep things simple and clear. I think that's a big learning. And then the last one is to choose your platform. And I mentioned already, after we've gathered a story, we never decide what we're doing with the story until we've gathered it. After we've gathered it, we sit with the story gatherer, storyteller, and we really thrash out, what did they find? What do the photos look like? What are the different angles? Because usually there's many different angles to one story. And then we choose the platform that's going to suit the story more than the other way around. We generally don't produce something for a platform. We choose the platform for the story. One of the things that we found, is probably another learning year, is the story never clear until you actually get there. So, for example, the Lithuania story, we knew there was a mouse, and of course it's going to be cute and it's going to make great pics. But there were so many other stories that came on that trip. We didn't realize this whole thing about the little boxes and how they fitted in. But we also found that as part of this, as Neris's work, that they were also protecting this little beetle. Nobody wants to see photos of a beetle. He's not so nice to look at as a little mouse. But it's a great another story. The beetle is an indicator species. So when its numbers go down, it means there's something very wrong with the species in the forest, I beg your pardon. And how they're protecting the beetle. So we have turned that into another story for social media that's in our own channel. So you never actually know what the story is until you get there. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of really good advice. I think a lot of organizations and communicators make the mistake of forgetting that the audience, the readers and the listeners are actually pretty smart. Yeah. You don't have to try and get okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just watching. Sorry. Carry on.
People want to be entertained. So, they want to be entertained. They don't want to be preached at. They really want to read something that's going to be relaxing and increase their knowledge at the same time. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. But you're dealing with real people, and storytelling, like you explained, it's hitting a very deep chord there.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, I'm looking at our time. We've got time for one more question, and let's look at the future. What does the future hold for FSC and storytelling? Or where does storytelling fit in with FSC in the future?
Absolutely. So we've just finished our 5-year communication strategy. And storytelling is at the core. And pretty much everything that we're doing around that core, whether it's our social media campaigns, where it's working with journalists, putting material on our own platforms, on our website, or whatever the case is, developing our annual report, it's all revolving around storytelling. Because we really have seen its power. We've seen that suddenly people are starting to talk about FSC. As I mentioned, we've got CEOs of companies who are sharing our content, when we tell a story or do a fun campaign like the Tree DNB. So this is something we've been wanting to do for a long time, is to talk about our impact in a good way. And now we can see that we are doing it in a way that people are realizing that we're making an impact. We're not issuing a wordy PDF or, God forbid, an Excel sheet, but we're actually telling a story that people are remembering and talking about amongst themselves. So our new communication strategy, which was launched in January, is central. Storytelling is central to it. So we have a number of things planned this year. We're doing stories, everything from saving of an indigenous community, saving a king vulture in the heart of Mexico, through to salmon now spawning in a previously salted up river in the US. We're looking at a monastery in Finland, and a story of protecting crocodiles in Gabon. So, so really vast box of stories coming our way, and no doubt we're going to have a lot of fun trying to put them in places and reach the right people.
It's like a way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking, really.
Exactly.
And then more things are coming to you as you open yourself to that.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I mean,
good for you.
Bev, how do we open to questions or?
Well, I think, did you ask one of the questions? I think you did ask, where do you see your job in storytelling for the future?
Yeah, that was the last. That was last.
But I had quite an interest because your work is so vast, and you just starting your journey into storytelling. You've seen the impact, and so. But how do you measure that impact? What do you do? What have you seen? What have been some of your good stories to know that this is the right route for the FSC to follow?
Well, we've always been on social media, not always. The last 5 or 6 years, we've been on social media, and our engagement was okay. I mean, it was very much on an average with other NGOs. But what we're finding now is that we are reaching hundreds of thousands of people with the campaigns like the Tree B&B. So that suddenly has shot up. If you look at the story on the Kew Gardens, the Tree Detector story with Kew Gardens, that reached 1.5 billion people, or what we call a potential audience. So, in other words, it's 1.5 billion people would see it, would read the publication that it's in, and they may or may not see the story. That's why we call it a potential audience. And just to give you an idea of how big that is, Harry and Meghan's wedding reached 1.7 billion people. So we just 0.2 billion short.
Well, we can't complain about 1.5 billion because, more than anything else, I think the everyday person in the street, they know how important it is to save the forests and the whole biodiversity piece that flows from maintaining the forest and keeping sustainable forestry around the world. And I think, whilst we know that somewhere in our consciousness, we look for that sign, we understand that that is protected forest and it is being managed well with good standards, but we actually don't know how much more there is to do. And I mean, I have to absolutely and utterly take my hat off that this is a mammoth task. And it's interesting that you're also telling the stories of the challenges, because the challenges gives us an insight into how big this problem is. And maybe you shouldn't be an NGO. You should be integral to every government, not a sideline, not be thought of as an afterthought. You shouldn't be having to fight through government policies and practices. It should be integral.
Of course. Well, if solving the deforestation problem was simple, it would have been done already. It's not easy for anybody to do. And the only way for us to do it is for everybody really to work together, whether it's FSD, all the NGOs, the governments, the civil society groups, whoever. We all need to work together. But we need to talk about that. We need to talk about why that's needed. And we do that now through stories in ways that people can understand.
Yeah. Yes. And so now, what's your final message to everyone on the street about using FSC products or certified products?
Yeah, using FSC products. Look, it's the best one there is. I can lay my head on a block for that. It's the simple thing that you can do to protect the forest. So look for the FSC label, and you don't have to go out there yourself and fight against the illegal deforestation. You use FSC products. It's the simplest thing you can do, and the simplest way that you yourself can protect.
One of the things I loved about some of your stories, just to wrap up, is the fact that, it was formerly seen as an officious technical organization. And through storytelling, you have been able to bridge this gap and take it into the mainstream of people's hearts and minds. And there is never a more important time for that message to come forward. I think one of the things that I am particularly aware of, if we continue doing what we are doing at the moment, by 2045, there will be no fish left in the sea. I mean, that's just one thing, and that's a huge challenge, but equally important. I mean, and it's all the whole biodiversity piece. The FSC is doing the most tremendous work. We look after bees, we look after these little, the whole balance is integral to life on the planet and life for human beings. So thank you, Karen. That was hugely insightful. That was, it actually gives me goosebumps to know that we are making such tremendous inroads in this very, very important piece. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, Jeanette. And I also just want to remind everybody, if you want to learn more about Forest Day and Forest Week, there are a number of events happening. So go to the FSC's website and they will guide you through what's happening and how you can play a bigger and better role in just helping to keep our forests sustainable. So thank you so much, ladies. Thank you for giving up of your time. That was hugely informative. And I must be honest, as a human being, quite heartwarming. Thank you so much.
Good.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you to you, Bev, and to everybody at YORStory. And thanks, Jeanette, for your question.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Karen.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.